Hi, I'm Adam Wolf, and I'm an engineer at Digi Wireless Design Services. And one of the things we often help out with are kind of prototypes to see kind of if the ideas have traction or any merit. And so one of the things I was tasked with was to create a demo for a trade show that has a proximity sensor, wireless communications, and flashy light effects. And so they really emphasized that it needs to be a great demo. So I said, okay, how long do I have for this? And they said, well, the trade show is on Saturday, and it was Monday, so okay, I got a pretty fast turnaround time. So I said, what makes a great demo? Well, it needs to attract people, so people need to, from far away, they need to see it and kind of walk up to it, and it needs to be playable, and it needs to need no instructions. So when you walk up and you interact with the piece, you shouldn't need to read something in order to interact with it, and it shouldn't fail you, and it shouldn't be hard to use. So I got some parts together, and I grabbed a Teensy microcontroller and the proximity sensor that I was instructed to use from the client, and an LED ring that had 24 RGB LEDs in a circle, and a battery, and an XB802.15.4 Series 1 wireless module. And I made a PCB and milled it out on another mill, and it worked fine, so I made 5 more, and I said, okay, now I gotta make this thing go. Okay. So I found the Fast LED library on the internet. It's an open source library for interacting with these pixels, and I said, okay, I wanna make a spinner. So first I'm gonna light one LED up, full brightness. And then I'm gonna wait a little bit, a few milliseconds, and then I'm gonna light the next LED up. But first I'm gonna fade all the LEDs a little bit down. And if they're below a certain threshold, let's just turn them off completely. So I turned this on, programmed it in, I watched it, and it made a spinner, kind of like a loading bar type thing, where the top end was really bright and each one down the line was a little bit dimmer until we got to the end, and then it was off completely. And I said, okay, well, that's cool, but what can I do with it? So I changed how much, in terms of tweaking, I changed how much the first LED was on and dropped it down 20%, and it was still almost just as bright, but on the other hand, the current draw on the battery was much lower, and so it would last longer in the trade show. So I said, that's good. And I changed how long I waited for in between kind of frames in the animation. And I was able to make it so that it would slowly go around in a circle or kind of really fast go, and I was like, yeah, I like that. So then I faded all the LEDs, and I said, how can I kind of change the fading? So let's fade it down really fast. And the first one was on completely, the next one was on like 30%, and the next one was on like 5%, and the next one's off. Well, that's not good. And so then I turned up the fade, or turned down the fade, and then it was just almost a full circle with just one light that was really bright that went around, and I said, nah, that's not good either. So then I kind of made a compromise in between so that it would have a nice long tail, wispy tail, but not be too it wouldn't be too long. So then I said, what about changing how we light up the next LED? So I said, can I make some sort of rainbow effect here? So rainbow effects are actually kind of tricky when you're working in the RGB color space. So when you define the colors as being a certain amount of red and a certain amount of green and a certain amount of blue, it's kind of tricky to come up with what combination is the next color in the rainbow. So one thing that makes that easier is the HSV space, or hue, saturation, and value. And so in that color space, I can just change that hue number and spin it around kind of in a circle, go from 0 all the way up to the maximum value and back around to 0. And I get a beautiful rainbow blendy effect. So I was like, good, I got my flashy light effects down. So then I need networking. So I had all these programmed. I had 5 different nodes and a central node kind of in the middle that was behind the scenes that was in charge. And So I said, we only have 5 nodes, and there's hardly any data going back and forth. Like, people can only touch these things so fast, and there's only so much that I can do. So I said, let's set everything to be broadcast. So every message is broadcast to every other node. So this, like, the central node will say, node 3, I need you to start a green spinner. And the third node says, okay, and all the other nodes say, I'm not node 3, and just ignore the message. So once you've got that going on, the green light starts its spinner, and then once the spinner starts, I programmed it so that it looked at the proximity sensor. So once the green light started, if you kind of put your hand over it, it would send a message back to the middle node that says, hey, I've been triggered. And I said, what happens, it has to be playable. So what happens if someone just walks away in the middle of this? Well, we need it to reset. So if the central node, if it doesn't hear anything for a while, we should reset all the nodes. So the central node says, every node, I need it to reset. And everything kind of starts back from the beginning. So I programmed this in, and I said, I turned them all on, and the first one starts red, and I put my hand in front of it. The next one started orange, and I put my hand in front of that, and then the next one started yellow, and I was like, I have just made XB Whack-A-Mole. That sounds to me like something that's playable without instructions. So okay. So I put the central node back into my computer, and I updated the program, and so that the first node that went off had a certain amount of time, I think it was 5 seconds, before it would reset, and then the next node that went off would wait for 4 seconds before a reset. It would slowly go down until at the very end, if you didn't almost instantaneously hit that violet circle, it would reset back at the beginning. And I said, well, I need some sort of victory condition, like how do we show people that they've won the game? And I said, oh, I got that rainbow spinner. So at the end, when I had programmed this whole demo up, I had XB Whack-A-Mole, and you start through the rainbow, and if you're fast enough, after a few tries, and you get to the very end, they all flash a bright rainbow pattern, and then it starts back over for the next person. So I said, yeah, it's Friday afternoon. I think that was a pretty productive week.